Body aching, feet wouldn't move. All I could do was march. On my way, I saw my uncle's cabin. I decided to drop by. Shh. Can you keep a secret? When I entered into the cabin of my Uncle Jam, this was happening inside.
Uncle Jam's Army. That's right. It's the only one you need to join. Uncle Jam. That's right. We talking about Uncle Jam's Army. And the reason why you need to join Uncle Jam's Army is for this history that I'm getting ready to hit you with. I usually hit you with the news, but I'm finna hit you with some history today. On December 28th, 1918, Charles Lewis began his last days as a private in the United States Army, just a month after the end of World War I. Lewis accepted his honorable discharge and left Camp Sherman in Chillicothe, Ohio, one of the few military facilities that housed black soldiers. He was headed home to Alabama. The next day, he was dead, killed by a lynch mob in Fulton County, Kentucky. While Lewis was waiting on the southbound train to leave Fulton, the local deputy sheriff boarded the train looking for suspects in a robbery. He approached Lewis, demanding to inspect his baggage. The young soldier, still in uniform, declared that he had just been honorably discharged and had never committed a crime in his life. Lewis even produced documents from his commanding officers at Camp Sherman, attesting to his excellent service record. An argument broke out between the two, and Lewis was charged with assault and resisting arrest. As Lewis was taken to the county jail in Hickman, Kentucky, news of the altercation spread. A mob of as many as 100 men gathered outside the jail. At midnight, masked men stormed the station, smashed the locks with a sledgehammer, pulled Lewis from his cell, and hanged him. His body, still in uniform, was left for all to see. Days after his murder, True Democrat, a Louisiana paper, published an editorial entitled "Nip It in the Bud." The root of the trouble was that the Negro thought that, being a soldier, he was not subject to civil authority. The editorial read, "The conditions of active warfare and the regulations of Army life have probably given these men more exalted ideas of their station in life than really exist, and having these ideas, they will be guilty of many acts of self-assertion, arrogance, and insolence, which will not be borne with in the South at least, and which will be followed by consequences to them more or less painful." Lewis is just one of dozens of African American veterans who were targets of racially motivated attacks detailed in Lynching America, Targeting Black Veterans, a report by Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama. Because the victims' military service was often overlooked by newspapers and officials at the time, the report cites only the lynching of veterans whose military service was verified by EJI, according to Jennifer Taylor, a staff lawyer at one of the report's authors. The number of veterans killed during this time period is likely much higher. The latest report is the follow-up of a larger investigation that documented more than 4,000 lynchings, extrajudicial killings, and often occurred in public, of African Americans between 1877 and 1950. A picket station of black troops near Dutch Gap Canal in Virginia, November 1864. The lynching of veterans served as a particular purpose. African Americans who served their country with honor posed a threat to the established racial hierarchy that was used to justify Jim Crow era racism. The murders were aimed at silencing the powerful voices of dissent against the racial system. The detailed accounts paint a graphic picture of racial violence in America and its insidious impact even on the men who answered their country's call. It's a history that is rarely shared publicly. After the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, the imposition of Jim Crow laws, the system of government-sanctioned segregation and racial bias that existed in the United States until the late 1960s, barred black people from fair access to the political and judicial process in many ways. Between the end of the Civil War and the years after World War II, thousands of black veterans were accosted, assaulted, and attacked. Many were lynched at the hands of mobs and individuals acting under the cover of official authority. Soldiers with the New York National Guard's 36th Infantry Regiment, popularly known as the Harlem Hellfighters, the unit was manned entirely by African American enlisted soldiers with both black and white officers. During the Red Summer of 1919, which earned its name from the anti-black riots that erupted in major cities across the country, countless black veterans were attacked, and in that year alone, at least 10 were lynched. For many African Americans, the military, though segregated and still infused with racial tension, offered at least a hope of economic and social mobility, but many returned to communities staunchly and at times violently opposed to the idea. It often breeded an internal and external conflict, and that played out in situations there where people were coming home and were protesting various kinds of mistreatment. Even during and after World War II, a global conflict meant to stem the tide of fascism and end mass genocide. Some of the same veterans who fought for those ideals in theaters across the world were victimized in the United States, often for exercising the very rights that they fought to protect. So if you're going to join something, if you're going to join, you might as well just join Uncle Jam's army. Join Uncle Jam's army. You know, you talking about, not getting any respect. As a man prepared to sacrifice his life, and for him to come back and be killed for engaging in something so sacred, the right to vote, for me as a veteran standing on people's shoulders like Maceo Snipes and dealing with my own discrimination in the military, it was just very personal. You could give so much to your country and then return to a country that at that time gave so little back. Today's the walls of the Taylor County Courthouse in Butler, Georgia, are 3 plaques honoring World War II veterans from the area. One reads Whites, and another, where Snipes' name can be found, is labeled Colored. On a third, more recent plaque, Snipes' name appears again, listed among all of his brothers in arms, whatever the color of their skin. So this is a hot topic, and a lot of people may or may not like this story, but hey, this is history. This is real, the real true history of this country, and you have to know the real true history of this country. If you think that you know the truth, you really don't. So it's a lot of bad misdeeds that this country has done, and this country will never ever be great unless everything is equal for all people, not just for a few. Uncle Jam's army, baby. That's right, Uncle Jam. To the rear. Oh.